Hey guys, Harry here, and welcome to episode 8 of Hare and Tortoise. You're joined by myself and Lee, the intrepid athlete, and thanks again for joining us. We are going to talk about a couple of main topics today, one of which is going to be why strength is really important for runners. Obviously, some people do more than others, some people do different types of strength training, and there's a load of different ways you can do it, but we're going to say or discuss why it is so important. And secondly, we're just going to give some general tips and advice for beginners. Obviously, a lot of people under lockdown have started running, which is brilliant. But maybe some have started too quickly or too intensely, or maybe they've reached a kind of point they don't know what they're doing very early on, which is totally understandable. So we're just going to offer some kind of general tips and guidance as a beginner runner. But yeah, first topic, we're going to talk about the importance of strength training, a topic that's I'd say it's kind of grown in popularity with the more recreational runners over the last few years. Obviously, at the elite end, they've probably been doing it quite a while now. But I'd say you just see generally more kind of information about it, more tips, more ways to do it, whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or whatever it is. I myself have been guilty of not doing much in the past at all, really. Although to be fair, you could argue some of the sports I've done might count in some ways as strength conditioning. Like I played a lot of tennis, did boxing at uni, which involves a lot of core work and body weight work. So in a way, it is strength conditioning, but nothing kind of specific to running. Obviously, running, as we've discussed previously, at the end of the day, it's like a single leg exercise. Like all the weight goes on one leg and then the other. So I haven't done many exercises that are kind of good for that, whether it's like a single leg squat or a lunge or whatever it might be. That's something I've been guilty of. But yeah, we're going to talk about the importance of strength and just kind of go through the body, talk about posture, where's really critical, where are areas you might not think are critical for running, and go through them. So yeah, is there anywhere on the body, Lee, you'd like to start in particular, or any topic?
Well, we'll look at the lower body, but first, you've never done any single leg strength training.
Not well, I mean, not really. Like obviously in the odd workout class there'll be like lunges and stuff like I'm not saying I've never done a lunge, but I mean I haven't really kind of focused, like obviously it's so important as a runner, or at least that's my opinion on it, to do the single leg exercise. I haven't really done them.
Honestly,
No.
I think your 5K PB, that's all it's missing. All
You
right.
don't want the single leg?
Honestly, right? 6 weeks of doing some single leg strength work and then retest your 5K and see what happens.
I'm doing it on Thursday, you know. I'm
What
doing
retest?
I'm doing a time trial on Thursday in Lancaster with Rowan Wood, but
Nice.
I don't know. The weather looks a bit dodgy, but I'll give it a go anyway.
So you hoping to go faster?
But yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I'll give it everything I've got, but it's looking windy, isn't it? So
The excuses are coming out already,
well,
aren't they?
no, like I'm just a realist. Like if it's windy, it obviously impacts your performance, doesn't it?
I
It's
know.
like 20 mile per hour winds, so you know.
Yeah, I'm just pulling your leg.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
so no, but I think, like I said straight away, some single leg strength work could be a missing link for yourself. But yeah, in terms of strength training and why it's important, so there's kind of, on the whole, for runners, one of the main focuses and one of the main benefits of strength training is for injury prevention. That's kind of what's been researched the most in terms of the application of strength training for running, is that looking at a certain group of runners and then a control group of runners, etc. After examining the injured runners, they always tend to find that they lack strength in certain key areas responsible for running, especially on the lower body. So that would be the kind of first thing that we'd look at. So if you think every time you run and you like impact the ground, like you talked about, that single leg jump or step, your muscles, such as your quads and your calves especially, have to contract to absorb that impact force. And if they're not strong enough to do that, or they fatigue quickly over time, then obviously something else has to take up the slack. And usually that's your ligaments and your tendons and your joints, which can then lead to those overuse issues that we tend to get a lot of the time, whether that's, knee pain, ankle pain, foot pain, etc., etc. 9 times out of 10, as again by stated by the research, those are down to a lack of strength or overuse, which again can stem from a weakness somewhere else around the body. So, like I said, lower body strength training is massively important to minimize the risk of getting injured. Like I said, it minimizes compensations. So strength training is one of the best ways to strengthen ligaments, strengthen tendons, increase bone density, which again, especially in ultra runners, all right, hairline fractures and stuff can be quite common. So again, having better bone density can condition those to withstand the impact forces, especially over 100, 200, 300 mile runs and stuff like that. So straight away, like I said, that injury prevention thing, if nothing else kind of gets you motivated to do strength training, if you're a runner that's always getting niggles and little bits here and there and they've never gone away, and you don't do strength training, I would say straight away, that's the missing link.
100%, yeah. I could just say from personal experience, like going from not doing any to doing some, like the niggles generally tend to go away or they don't come back, and obviously there is less injuries. I think, as we said, like a lot of runners don't do it because there's that perceived kind of, oh, you're going to put on weight and you're going to get slower. When in reality, it's kind of opposite of that. You're going to get stronger. Your body can exert more strength. Like each stride is like easier to exert for that particular strength.
Absolutely.
So it really, really does make a difference, both, as you say, in injury prevention, but also performance.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's just, I guess it's tricky knowing where to kind of start from someone that doesn't do any. Like obviously there's so much of the body you can address, but legs are obviously important, but that's not the only part, right?
No, but so like you just touched on there, the other big thing with the benefit of strength training is run economy. So like you said there, every time your foot hits the ground, it requires oxygen to contract those muscles and therefore generate force into the ground to propel you forwards. And obviously, the stronger that muscle is, the more force it can put into the ground. Therefore, the less oxygen it's going to demand for the same effort compared to if you were a little bit weaker. Does that make sense? So that means every step you take, you are demanding less energy from your body. So therefore, you are going to fatigue less quickly over a predetermined amount of distance. So let's say your legs start to tire after 10 miles in a marathon. If you've gotten stronger, you could potentially then expand that to not really feeling that fatigue in the legs until you're 16 miles, 20 miles in, by just being stronger because you're demanding less energy each stride. So that's referred to as run economy. Another great reason why obviously you'd want to engage in strength training. Then the other one is from a technique standpoint as well. So, if you think ground contact time wants to be minimized, so therefore we can recover the foot quickly under the body and then bring it forward into the next stride, which helps minimize overstriding. So having good, strong and durable Achilles tendons and calves means, again, you're going to spend less time on the ground per stride and also utilize some of that free energy that you can get from the Achilles storing elastic energy. So again, being stronger means you have more potential to store elastic energy in the Achilles, and again, utilize that like a spring to propel you forward. And that energy, like we just said there, in terms of muscle contractions, cost oxygen, whereas the energy in your Achilles tendon doesn't cost anything because it's a tendon, but it's only there for a short period of time. So again, the stronger you are and the more durable that tendon is from strength training, the more energy you can get for free to help you propel you forward.
Right, okay. No, that's interesting. I've never even thought about strengthening the Achilles, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't even, how would you go about strengthening the Achilles generally?
So the Achilles is, in terms of not necessarily strengthening it, but making it capable of storing more energy. So plyometrics is the best way to do that. So jumps, lands, bounds, all that sort of stuff. Sprint work is obviously a more run-specific way to do that, especially hill sprints. But obviously, you want to build up some durability in those the tendons and stuff around the Achilles and the muscles in the calf and the soleus and stuff like that before you go straight into full-on sprints and hill sprints and stuff, because again, that tends to be where people then get calf strains or plantar fasciitis or hamstring pulls. So again, just doing some general plyometrics and stuff beforehand is like a kind of conditioning phase, will just help prepare those muscles and ligaments ready for then engaging in your more specific stuff through intervals and hill sprints. But yeah, jumping and landing is one of the easiest ways to start with. So little hurdles, box jumps, single leg hops, forward, back, lateral. Like I said, it doesn't have to be super complicated. It's just focusing on jumping, landing correctly, absorbing that impact force, and then quickly utilizing that elastic energy you've built up, and then going into another jump or bound or hop. So again, it's where you see, quick hurdles and stuff like that. When you see in strength classes or boot camps and stuff, that's a great way straight away to build up some like I said, storage of elastic energy in the Achilles.
Right, so I'm guessing you do a lot of those exercises at your classes, like at the weekend. Would that be right?
Yeah, so every class focuses on agility, balance, coordination. So obviously, when it comes to the sort of agility element, part of that includes plyometric training. So again, it can be as simple as incorporating coordination into it as well. So jumping sideways straight into a forward jump. So again, you're absorbing impact force and then using that to propel yourself forward into a 2-footed jump, etc. And yeah, hurdles, bounds, seated box jumps. We do loads of different ones, but like I said, it doesn't have to be overly complex. I keep some variety in there just to keep it interesting for the people who attend the class. But you could follow literally just like a 4 to 6 week plyo phase of just some basic jumps and lands, and probably get some real good benefit out of that in terms of improving durability around the calf and the Achilles.
Interesting, yeah. So calf and Achilles obviously super important part of the body.
Yeah.
But going even further down that into the foot, do you address anywhere in the foot? Like I was recently recommended doing from prehab actually toe yoga. I know that's not necessarily strength conditioning. You might not put it into that class, but
if you're trying to move a muscle or generate force or anything like that with the foot, that could still be classed as strength, or at least mobility. So remember, we talked about in a previous episode of actively being able to access movement from muscles and joints. So toe yoga is absolutely something that I don't get to address as much in the group classes, in terms of being able to move big toe independently of the rest of the toes and vice versa, and doing things like towel scrunches and stuff, which are all great exercises for conditioning the foot. But we tend to do it more of kind of a global thing, so incorporating the foot into single leg balance, whether that's loaded, unloaded, or add another movement. So focusing on, again, building strength in the arches, etc., through balance, and also absorbing of movement through steps, jumps, hops, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, the toe yoga, especially the big toe, it needs to be flexible. So you think that's your foot and that's your big toe. Every time your foot hits the ground, you want that toe to be able to bend, to then again allow the foot to transfer through under the body efficiently without it collapsing excessively inwards or outwards. So obviously, if the big toe isn't as flexible, or you don't have that direct control, the foot can collapse in a little bit more and pronate excessively. It's called the windlass mechanism. So it's just a basic part of the running gait cycle. So absolutely owning the ability to move your feet and have some good range of motion, the big toe especially, is, I would say, an important part of running and strength as well.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't think many people would even think about toes being an important part of running. Like I didn't have a clue until I was told recently.
Which that's the first thing, or pretty much the first thing that's touching the ground. Especially if you're a 4-foot striker, it's going to be the ball of feet followed closely by the toes, and then even if you're a heel striker, their toes aren't far behind. And like I said, as the heel lifts up, which obviously regardless of which 4-foot heel strike you do, the whole foot obviously then goes into that extension, plants the foot like this and then pushes under the body. So if you've got really rigid toes or not got that independent control, that again could change what muscles and joints work then for your run gait, and potentially cause compensations, and again increase the risk of injury. So again, it's another argument for strength training.
Yeah, it's a weird one because, as you said, it's the first thing that contacts the ground. But people, well, at least I know, and not many people seem to talk about toes or feet being like an important part of running, which is kind of really weird when you think about it, because it's literally the only part of the ground that's only part of your body that's contacting the ground. Well, when you say like toe yoga, I mean, there can't be that much. Is it literally just moving your toes about, like, or
so the couple of key exercises that you'll see, especially from the sort of the prehab, the physios, and all that stuff. So it's the ability of, while the foot's flat on the floor, you can lift your big toe without lifting the rest of your toes.
Yeah.
Or pushing your big toe down and being able to lift the rest of the toes without that big toe coming up. And some people can do it quite well. Some people, really struggle.
I got tested on it and I couldn't do any of it at all.
So that, what that means is, again, you've not got necessarily the neuromuscular pathways from your brain to your toes sort of efficiently built up. So again, it's every time your foot hits the ground, your brain doesn't always necessarily understand what's going on with the foot. So again, it might not have as much control as it should. So just by doing that being able to distinguish between the big toe and the rest of the toes, etc., is just one way to build up some pathways again with the foot. Also being able to splay the toes and scrunch them together, so being able to move them outwards and inwards. Doing things to strengthen the arch with foot movement, so like the towel scrunches, so just putting a towel underneath the edges of your toes and just scrunching it under bit by bit with the big toes and the little toes, and scrunching it underneath the arch of foot just to build some strength at bottom. And then even things like heel walks and toe walks, again, just to build some strength and stability around the foot and the ankle, as a good way to kind of finish off those sorts of toe yoga senses. So it's literally as it sounds, you walk on your heels with your toes pointing up, and then walk on your toes with your heels off the ground. Just doing some little movements, sort of 20, 30 meter lengths on that, just to finish off that toe yoga. So again, it's a good little bit of a dynamic stretch as well as some stability for the foot and ankle. But yeah, it's not overly complex, but you'll be surprised at how many people struggle to do it.
Oh, 100%, yeah. I'm sure there'll be some YouTube videos as well on toe yoga as well.
Yeah, and also a really good book that I kind of got introduced to with that was a book called Running Rewired.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just seeing if I had it on my bookshelf to grab it, but
right.
But yeah, no, I can't remember the author's name, but that's a really good book that introduced me to the concept of the foot. And the windlass mechanism and all that sort of stuff, and also being able to do that toe yoga. So again, it was kind of an assessment of his of, all right, one thing straight away for injury prevention is let's look at how your foot moves.
Yeah. What would you say? Like, obviously, toes, by the sound of it, very crucial. Going back down the foot, can you increase the strength of like your ankles? Is that a thing, or like the middle of your foot?
So if you think the main muscles that are around the ankle are the ones that go from the gastrocnemius, so your calf, your soleus, and all that stuff, they go into the ankle joint. So if you want stability around the ankle, we've dressed the foot now in terms of giving some more stability there. So then you want to move up the chain towards your calf, your soleus muscles, and build some strength in those muscles to help support that ankle joint as well. So that's where super basic calf raises and stuff like that will really help just build some strength in those muscles to help stabilize the ankle.
Brilliant. Yeah. So basically, obviously the legs are super important. The feet are super important. What would you say, like going down the leg? Is there any particular area that's kind of more crucial than others, or would you say like, obviously it's better to do as much as you can, but would you say there's one area, maybe the quads or the hamstrings or anything, that if you don't have time or you push or you want to do one that you do, what would you say?
I would say there's a couple, but then you can easily cater that towards if you are suffering with niggles, then you can cater that. So if you tend to feel like you've got more stiffness and discomfort around the calf, Achilles, ankles, and all that stuff, if you're time constrained, you can only kind of maybe, let's say, do one exercise, then look at calf raises.
Okay.
Unloaded to begin with, but again, if you can add a little bit of load, whether that's dumbbells, even a weighted rucksack or whatever, then progress that a little bit. Then if you work up the body and you find that you suffer with a bit of a knee issue or something like that, then absolutely look at the quads and the glutes. And then again, lunges, one of the best exercises to hit both of those muscle groups, especially the quads. So the quads and the calves work the hardest every time your foot hits the ground in terms of absorbing that impact force. So if they're weak, something else has to absorb that. And like I said, it's usually tendons, ligaments, and then causes, an overuse at that particular joint. So yeah, so I would say calf raises for the sort of lower leg and lunges for the upper leg straight away are probably two great exercises you can start with. And obviously, if you've got time, do them both. We're talking those two exercises plus some sort of deadlift, whether that's single leg deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, or whatever to address the hamstrings. You've got three great exercises there for your lower body, and that's your lower body pretty much covered. And again, start off body weight, build up a little bit of external load, and you're sorted in terms of just getting general movement and general strength.
Yeah. A lot of people would probably like not at home not have like big weights or whatever. And maybe, people don't like to go to the gym for whatever reason. I'm probably one of them.
Yep.
Obviously, as you said, you can start with like body weight, whether it is a lunge or a squat or whatever it is. But I'm guessing ideally you want to kind of progressively overload that. Without weights, I know there's different ways, like you could slow it down, I guess, or just do it in different ways? What would you say on that?
So you could easily utilize tempo to increase the difficulty of the movement. So that's how fast it takes to perform one rep. So stuff like your calf raises and your lunges are really easy to do that, especially on the eccentric phase, i.e. the lowering phase. So as you've lifted your heel off the floor and lower it back down, you can take sort of 3 to 5 seconds. That's an easy way straight away to improve the difficulty of that, plus strengthening those muscles in the specific contraction that they use to absorb forces, because they contract eccentrically to absorb impact force. Same with the quadriceps. So again, you can do a lunge where once you've stepped that leg forward, you take 3 to 5 seconds to lower that back knee down towards the floor and then explode out the bottom. So again, you can use tempo on that. RDLs or single leg deadlifts are a bit more challenging to use tempo because balance is a really limiting factor. But that's where you can use, like I said, something like a Romanian deadlift, and just get a load of water bottles and chuck them in a rucksack and hold that into the chest. And that's an easy way you can do some sort of hip hinge movement or deadlift movement with a weighted rucksack, or any objects that you have knocking around at home. Even if it's just an extra couple of kilos, that's still going to add an extra challenge to the body.
Yeah, definitely. Anything you can do to progressively overload it. It doesn't have to be like an actual weight. It can just be, as you say, like a water bottle or just something lying around. It doesn't matter if you don't know the exact weight, as long as you're progressively overloading it. I guess that's the main thing.
Absolutely. But water is one of the easiest things to do, because 1 litre of water equals 1 kilo. So that's an easy way for you. You buy some of them big 5 litre plastic water bottles, and then use those as weights in a rucksack or something, even because they usually have handles on as well. You can hold the handles whilst doing stuff like your lunges and things like that as well.
It surprises me the amount of people that don't know that 1 litre is 1 kilogram. Honestly, I tell people that all the time, and they're like, surely it's not 1 kilogram. I'm like, yes, it's exactly the same.
GCSE science.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's probably lower than that, to be fair. But
that's, like I said, that is an easy win in terms of strength, and it's easily overloaded, because you could even empty half of them and then have 2.5 kilos in each bottle, and then add water as you go to give you a rough 3, 4, 5 kilos and stuff like that in between, and like I said, and if you start getting to the point where you're getting a few water bottles but you can't hold on to them, get yourself a rucksack, and you can chuck it on your shoulders. You can hold it in front of the chest like this. You can hold it by your side. There's, just with a rucksack and some water straight away, you can get to the point where you maybe got 5-10 kilos worth of weight straight away.
Definitely, yeah. The hip joint, or the hip area, is one that really interests me. Again, it's one I hadn't even thought of, or obviously done in the past, and just kind of neglected, and didn't really think it was kind of that important for running. But since doing just a few exercises, I don't know if they're specific to the hip, really. I know I mentioned the, I think it's side adductor, is it?
The abductor, yeah. So the side leg raises, basically.
Yeah, and just doing a few of them, that really seems to have helped quite a lot. And just you just feel better on each stride. It's quite hard to describe it, but it seems to have improved the strength quite a lot. What are your general thoughts on the hip area?
So the hip is essentially almost the prime mover for running. So if you think the muscles around the hips and the glutes, so they're responsible for what we call hip flexion, hip extension. So in running, let's think as you push the foot behind you, the whole leg goes behind your hips. That's called hip extension. So that's a big part of forward propulsion, which obviously utilizes a lot of muscles around the hips and the glutes. Then as you recover that leg and the knee comes forward of the body ready to hit the floor again, that's called knee flexion. So think about the knee coming towards the chest. Again, all the muscles around the hip are key in terms of lifting that leg and allowing it to transfer through. So if you think straight away for leg going behind, leg coming forward, a lot of strength is required around the hips to do that efficiently. And then also having a good stable pelvis. So if you think the pelvis, as one leg lifts off the floor, you've now lost that point of balance. The pelvis is going to want to do this.
Yeah.
And that side that's now no longer in contact with the ground wants to drop while this other side stays up. So again, you think if you're doing that every time, over time, that's potentially going to overload something like the knee, because the pelvis isn't stable. It's going to transfer that instability down the body to something like a knee collapsing in every time your foot hits the ground. So all the muscles around there, and like you said, the glutes, which includes things like the abductor muscles on the outside of the thigh, they're all key to keeping the pelvis stability, which then can transfer to that knee stability as well. So again, stuff like your lunges, your squats and all that stuff are great for strengthening around the hips. Obviously, the hamstrings are included in that, so like your deadlifts and all that sort of stuff are great for it. But then you can go even smaller muscle groups, smaller stabilizers like the abductor side leg raises or the banded walks that you see people do, a little mini bands around their legs and their knees. That's kind of a similar exercise to what you're talking about with the side leg raises.
Yeah, so you just recommend like kind of simple movements to begin with if they hit, like something maybe with a resistance band or something where you're lying down kind of thing.
Yep. So two exercises straight away. What I would say is some form of abduction exercise. So it can literally be lying on your side and lifting the leg up. Again, if you've never done this stuff before, you can start with body weight and then add a little mini band around the ankles to make it more challenging, or ankle weights or something like that. I would say that one, or the banded walk. So it's the same movement you're talking about, but just stood up. So you step one foot out, step the other foot back, moving side to side.
Are you crouched on that?
So you can do both. So you can do crouch and leg straight, and they both kind of work slightly different areas of the glute complex. So you're best off doing both variations.
Okay.
So that'd be the one. And then the other one would be banded knee drives. So you can do them from lying. So literally just lying on the ground on your back, legs straight, with a little band around your toes. Pull one knee into your chest while keeping the other leg straight. So that leg that's straight is then providing the resistance as you pull your other knee into the chest. Alternate legs. And then you can progress to more complex variations of that, from going lie-in to then standing. So then obviously you've got the hip element in it as well as a bit of balance, because now you're trying to stand on one leg as you're pulling that knee into the chest. There'd be two straight away that kind of more fine-tune exercises for around the hips and the glutes that I would add in on top of your lunges and your calf raises.
Right, because I guess the lunges and calf raises, I guess, are more considered kind of compound, I guess, like they cover a lot of areas, whereas
the lunge definitely, yeah. The calf raise would probably still be classed as a sort of isolation exercise because it's only across one joint, but absolutely they're what we call more sort of global exercises. So, again, not sort of fine-tuning those smaller stabilizers and stuff like that you would from some more of those little banded exercises. And they're more akin to what you'd get from a physio, where they've first addressed a weakness somewhere and they go, right, well, let's use some of these smaller exercises to fine tune those stabilizers, build those back up first, and then start adding in the bigger exercises through squats, lunges, blah, blah, blah.
Right. So you'd actually, as a strength conditioning coach, would you start with the global exercises generally, or would you start with the kind of more specific ones?
So that's dependent on how they move. So obviously, again, we've talked about this before, but I will always assess every runner that I work with. So I have a series of tests that I send them, whether I'm coaching them online or whether face-to-face. They'll carry out those tests, which helps me determine their current movement quality and sort of basic strength and stability levels. And then that helps me then determine whether or not they need to go to kind of what I call level 1 strength exercises, which is your mini band exercises, your smaller stabilizer exercises and stuff like that, or whether they can progress to level 2, which might start introducing some more bodyweight stuff like the lunge, or kind of level 3, where if they've got the time and the equipment and stuff, they can start introducing more kettlebells, dumbbells and barbells if they've got access to that kit. So like I've got a guy who I've started coaching at the moment that he's done a few Ironman and stuff like that. He's looking at doing his first ultra, but he's got some knee pain at the moment. So from assessments, he's a strong lad, but at this point he needs those more fine-tuned exercises for a few weeks before we start progressing him on to the more complex stuff, which he has experience in doing already. So he's done strength training, but he needs it regressing back just a little bit first, get some of those basic movements down, and then we can progress back into lunges, squats, all that sort of stuff.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, it basically depends on where you are in your kind of strength progression, and
experience as well. Because again, even if you've not got any injuries or anything like that, but you're brand new to strength training, I would still start off with those basic exercises, providing that they're not super strong already naturally.
And same goes even if you're like a really good runner, but you haven't done strength training. I guess you still start very kind of
it's a completely different stimulus to run in. Demands different coordination, strength, neuromuscular activity, etc. So it's still something that needs to be learned over time. So you certainly wouldn't just throw, even if it's an experienced ultra runner, you still wouldn't throw them straight into the deep end of, giving them dumbbells and barbells and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit off topic, I guess, but when you're looking at runner's stride, say someone's got a particularly kind of small stride, and it's like, I guess you could say a deficiency. Would you say that's usually down to a lack of range of motion or flexibility or strength in one particular area, or would you say it's...
Stride length is, I'd say it could be one of those things, but for me, I would have to then delve deeper in. So if we just started off looking at their stride and thought, well, actually, it's too short or too long, then potentially the first protocol would actually just be trying to retrain that stride. You know,
Okay.
can they run a larger stride or a smaller stride? You know, using the kind of 180 steps per minute or whatever. Again, there's obviously a lot of debate around that particular cadence in terms of, well, does it actually apply, especially the longer distance that you go? But yeah, so I would actually look at queuing them and maybe retraining that first. And obviously, if they're not in pain or discomfort and they can still maintain this new stride that we want them to do, then essentially they wouldn't need to worry too much about specific strength for their stride. If they're in pain, and then we look at their stride, especially if they're overstriding, and we find that they're in pain and discomfort, and then we bring that stride rate down, bring that stride rate up, because obviously they're overstriding because they're taking too few steps per minute, and they still feel discomfort or pain, then I would look at strength. If we bring that stride rate more towards that sort of 180 and they don't feel any discomfort or pain anymore, again, it was probably just because they were overloading because they're taking too big of a step. So again, we'd go, right, well, that seems to have fixed the problem. Then just focus on some basic strength work for maintenance rather than any specific stuff for your stride. So it would all be assess and obviously understand how that person moves, because stride is only going to be one piece of the puzzle. So, if they're off with their stride and, like I said, they are suffering with pain or something like that, then I would want to go into a full assessment of movement, quality, range of motion, stability, and all that sort of stuff as well.
Right. Okay. But as you say, it's kind of, it's not a finished science. Like some people will have lower stride rate, and some people have a higher stride rate, and they'll still get same times or whatever. So it's hard to say, that looks short, it should be longer or whatever it might be.
Absolutely. And especially because for me, like, it's not that I don't believe in sort of the finer tunings of run technique. It's just, for me, I get much more bang for my buck focusing on movement quality and strength.
Yeah.
And also just general programming, because the amount of people that do too much too quickly, that tends to lead to those injuries and plateaus and all that sort of stuff. I always find I get much bigger bang for bucks from those things than going, right, I'm going to spend months and months and months changing one particular part of your run technique in the hope that it doesn't change anything else that you already do very well, and then try and ingrain that into your brain over years so that it sticks when you're fatigued. And that's the key. That takes a lot of time and effort. And, like I said, if you're looking after the 1%, that could be worth your time and money and stuff like that. But for me, especially because of recreational, semi-competitive runners and stuff like that, most of them don't tend to do any strength training. Most of them tend to lack range of motion in key areas, and most of them tend to increase their mileage too quickly. So I would rather address those easy, low-hanging fruits, as they were, than go, right, let's ignore all that and let's spend months and months and months working on your cadence and hoping that you still maintain that cadence when you're tired, because a lot of runners don't. That's why, again, you look at the barefoot heel striking debate where everyone's like, well, you should forefoot strike. When you look at a lot of runners, once they're tired, because they can't consciously keep thinking of doing it, they obviously forget because they're fatigued. They go back to kind of what they defaulted to at the start. It's very hard to retrain that sort of thing.
Yeah, and as you say, it's like with whatever it is, whether it's diet or training or whatever, a lot of people focus on, the 5% of things instead of the 95%. Whether it's running, just make sure you run. Don't worry about the fancy gadgets and all that kind of stuff to begin with. Obviously, if you get to a point where it's like elite level and you're looking for the 1%, as you say, then you might look at the trainers that are 300. Like I think the Alpha Fly are like 300 quid or something like that.
Christ.
I know it's mental, isn't it? But
yeah, and we've said this before, haven't we? We've said, look, address the big stuff first before you move on to the little stuff, especially if you're just recreational or kind of semi-competitive and stuff like that. If you've not addressed these big glaring things that, like you said, especially strength work now becoming more and more popularized by running coaches, and you've not addressed that piece, and you're like, well, I want to get faster, or I'm always getting injured and I don't know why. That's probably one thing straight away, and it's easy to do. You don't have to go to a gym. You don't have to buy loads of expensive weights. You're not going to put on loads of weight and mass, all right? But you potentially could have a missing link there of minimizing those niggles or just generally improving a little bit of performance.
Yeah, 100%. I know we said at the start we were going to do tips for beginners, but just looking at time, I'm thinking what we should do instead instead of rushing like the rest of the body, because we've still got core and just kind of upper body and that kind of area. Just for this episode, we'll just do completely strength training, and maybe in a future episode do tips for beginners, because there's quite a lot you can say on that, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. You know, this, like you said, this is kind of the stuff I enjoy talking about the most anyway. So
it's really interesting, because obviously this is what you do, right? You're an expert in this, so constantly learning. And I know I'm just sitting back a lot of the time, but it's really interesting to hear why different parts of the body are interesting. And hopefully, it will be for other people as well.
Again, so especially if you look at the most common injury site is the knee. In terms of running, the most common injury site is the knee. So whether that's IT band syndrome, which causes pain on the outside of the knee, you've got patellar tendinopathy, which is kind of behind the kneecap, or runner's knee again. So there's lots of different issues that we tend to suffer with the knee. And again, though, so if you go to a physio, and I'm sure lots of runners who have had niggles or actual injuries have gone to a physio, and what do they get given to help with getting
exercises?
Which are based on improving strength.
Yeah.
You know, they've identified that you lack strength in a particular muscle group, which is causing that overload of that particular joint. So if we look at the knee, like we talked about, quads and hips and glutes, which technically are hips as well. So they're giving you strength exercises to overcome that injury, and then eventually looking at potentially then taking those strength exercises further. And that's what a lot of people then tend to neglect. You get your 6-week, your 12-week rehab program focused on those basic exercises we talked about, stabilizers and all that sort of stuff. But then after that, you need to take it that step further, because all they've done is brought you kind of back to baseline, as it were. You then take it that step further, because that baseline was the reason why you got injured in the first place, because you didn't have the prerequisite strength to do what you were demanding of your body.
I think that's what a lot of people do. Obviously, you get the exercises, you do them, and then miraculously you're back. They've worked basically, and then you feel you don't need to do them anymore, which just isn't the case. That's when the niggles are going to start coming back, or even worse injuries, or whatever it might be. I know it is tricky, to be fair, a lot of the time. Like, runners just a lot of the time want to go out and run, as we say, but it's just so important. As you said, you can do a lot in 5-10 minutes. If you just focus on one area or even 2 areas, you can do a lot. So,
So let's put it this way, though. So a couple of things straight away. First one is the biggest risk factor for an injury is a previous injury. So if you've already had an injury, you are now a lot more likely to get injured again. So straight away,
that's not good news for me.
Well, it's a reality check, though. So straight away, in terms of the strength exercise that you were given to get over that injury in the first place, just because the pain and injuries recover doesn't mean that you don't need those exercises continually, because like we just said there, straight away that should be motivation, because the biggest risk factor is having an injury already, in terms of potentially risking another one. So that's a case straight away for maintaining strength from what you've been given by a physio. And number two, in terms of the sort of difficulty or the subscription to strength work and all that sort of stuff. If you think the biggest risk factor of getting injured is another injury, so therefore you obviously want to continue those exercises, think about it from this perspective as well. You say you don't like strength training, or you haven't got time for strength training, but then if you're injured, how about you record how much time you've had to miss running because of injury? Surely you would want that time back. And if that means then sacrificing 1 run a week or 2 runs a week to then keep going year round, surely that's worthwhile, just doing a couple of strength sessions to allow you to continue running. Imagine if you look back on your running year and you went, well, I've been out for 4 months for injury, and that's 4 months of the year I've missed running. If you were to just drop a couple of sessions a week of running, that isn't going to amount to 4 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're not, you're actually then, yes, not getting to run as much, or even, especially the level of strength training we're talking about. You can do it on the day you run. I do both. I run during the morning or the evening and switch, vice versa for strength. You're talking 30 minutes to an hour is what I do for my strength, and I still get a run in at the same time.
Yeah, but I guess you're saying, though, doing that would guarantee you don't get injured, which I guess it wouldn't do. Obviously, it would definitely help, but you can never guarantee it, can you?
You can never guarantee injury, and especially non-overuse related injuries like you fall over and sprain
Yeah,
your
yeah.
ankle and stuff like that. You can't obviously guarantee that they're not going to happen. That's just like any sport. But like I said, the research shows that we can massively minimize those risks with strength training.
100%, 100%. Moving up onto the core area, obviously an area I'd say most runners kind of know now that is actually quite important for a variety of reasons,
Yeah.
whether it's posture or just your general kind of, running movement. A lot of people are doing like crunches a lot of the time in the spare time or different ab work, whatever it might be. What's your view on the core area?
So the core is again massively understood, not just by runners, by a lot of people. So there's two elements in terms of training the core. There's the one where everyone does lots of crunches and sit-ups and all that sort of stuff, which helps improve muscular endurance of the muscles around the core. But the other thing that people don't understand about the core is it's designed to help resist excessive motion at the spine. All
Okay.
right. The spine is only capable of certain degrees of motion, especially the lower back. So to help minimize moving the spine through excessive ranges of motion, we need a rigid core. I think of it as a cylinder. So
Yeah.
your spine's in the middle of that cylinder. You want that cylinder to minimize excessive movement that way, forwards, backwards, rotation, all that sort of stuff. So all the superficial muscles and the deep muscles within the core, all right, they need to be strong enough to withstand moving the spine whilst we engage in other things like moving our arms and legs in running.
Yeah.
So core stability training isn't crunches and sit-ups and all that stuff. It's engaging the core, stabilizing the spine whilst adding in another movement. So think about something like a dead bug. So where we're lying on our backs and we move our arms and legs and minimize overly arching our lower back by engaging the core. So you're
Okay.
keeping the spine stable whilst moving the arms and legs. All right, that's core stability. So it's basically holding a position through the core whilst then adding movement with the arms and legs. All right, farmers carries. Farmers carries is a great one to minimize that lateral flexion. So it's bending from side to side whilst carrying.
What's
So carrying heavy weights in your hands and just walking with them.
okay?
So that's a great one to help train the obliques, internal, external obliques, all the big muscles on the side of the body to resist that excessive lateral flexion. So again, as we run, remember what we talked about, the pelvis dropping from side to side. We want to minimize that whole body dipping. So
Yeah.
having good, strong obliques and stuff like that to minimize movement is quite a key concept. So that's where stuff like said, core stability training rather than just kind of ab exercises comes into play. So like I said, some of my go-to ones for beginners are things like dead bugs, power off presses, farmers carries, all that good stuff. So just to help cover, the power off press helps cover rotation, the dead bugs help cover anti-extension, and the farmers carries cover lateral flexion. So all key core stability elements. Like I said, minimizing that movement at the spine whilst engaging in obviously other movement, like I said, walking, moving the arms and legs, just like when you run. Okay. If you think when you do a sit-up, you contract your ab muscles and just move the whole body forward and backwards. When do you ever do that when you run?
Yeah, true, true.
You want to keep your torso upright and rigid as you're moving your arms and legs independently of it. That's core stability. That's maintaining stability through the spine, which can, like I said, make sure you run more efficiently, minimize excessive pelvis movement, minimize the instance of lower back pain. Because again, if you find you'll get lots of back pain, potentially sit-ups and crunches could be doing more harm than good, because your back pain might be because it's intolerant to what we call flexion extension, i.e. moving that way and that way. And if you every time you do a sit-up, you're moving into that flex, that could be what's actually exacerbating your lower back pain. So I'm a big believer in core stability training, not just ab exercises. Now, like I said, I'm not saying they don't have their place, but in terms of a strong core, it needs to be stable, not good at doing hundreds of crunches and sit-ups.
Interesting, yeah, because let's be honest, most brothers would probably, if they get told to do core work, they're probably going to be doing, abs, crunches or sit-ups, which, as you said, could have the place, but it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. We need to do the exercises that, when you're running, you want to be basically stable in that kind of running motion, just, going forward, obviously. So doing those exercises where, you may be trying to keep balance and being pushed by someone or whatever it might be. That does make a lot of sense, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, if the basic, we have got something right in terms of, we already engage in a couple of basic core stability exercises, which is the plank and the side plank.
yeah.
You're holding that plank position and minimizing the spine doing that and arching really badly. So you're using the abs to make sure you keep a nice flat back. So
Yeah.
that's a great, what we call anti-extension core exercise. The problem is lots of people do it incorrectly. And then the side plank, again, you're trying to stop your hips from dropping down and engaging through the obliques to build stability around the spine and through the obliques. So again, they're actually good beginner progressions for core stability before moving on to more complex stuff.
Is there a way you can progress the plank or not?
So you can do things like obviously taking one arm or one leg off the floor. So again, you're minimizing points of contact. You can put a band around a fixed point and then wrap that band around your elbows. So the band is pulling your arms towards the post and you're resisting that. So it'll engage the core even more. You can obviously potentially put a little bit of load on the back and hold that position as well. So there's lots of ways you can progress it. Again, when we're talking about strength and stability. So if you can hold a plank for a minute, that exercise is kind of redundant, providing it's being done with correct technique. So you want to progress it or move on to some of the more complex core exercises. The side plank, a great one to progress onto, is called the Copenhagen Plank. So it's where you're utilizing the legs a little bit more into the equation, but still working the obliques as well.
Right. Yeah. No. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because again, like as I said, people are going to go and do crunches, and I guess quite a lot of people do planks, to be fair. But it's all about progression. Once you've done a minute, it doesn't. It's not much benefit to going further than that, really, is there?
No.
So,
and the key is as well, can you do it for a minute with correct technique? So looking from the side, does your spine look like this? If it does, chances are you're hanging off your lower back muscles. So I remember I talked about potentially doing more harm than good. So that means your lower back muscles are over engaged and could cause back pain. A core exercise could lead to that if it's done incorrectly. So straight away, diagnose your own plank. If you're feeling the plank in your lower back, you're doing it wrong.
Okay. So it should it just be completely flat, would you say?
Yeah, you're going to have a natural curve in your lower back, but it shouldn't be the point where you feel like your hips are sagging down below your chest. And then, like I said, that you feel those you'll feel those lower back muscles engage if you've dropped your hips too much and started to sag too much. And like we talked about in a previous one, we have that thing called reciprocal inhibition. So what it means is that when a muscle engages, the muscle on the opposite side of the body has to relax. So if you drop your hips and engage your erector spinae muscles either side of the spine by overextending the spine, they're contracting. The only way they can do that is for the core muscles on the front of the body to relax. So that means is you're not even engaging your core in the plank, you're just working your lower back.
Okay, yeah.
It's really important, and the plank is such a butchered exercise. Again, it's little things like that can, again, just make your strength training a little bit more valuable if you're taking time to do those things correctly.
Definitely, yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you did an exercise like wrong, it's kind of like
It's pointless,
useless, really, and it can, as you say, create a like injury or whatever as well. So you've really got to home in on the technique, I guess, 100%.
Definitely.
So final kind of area, I guess, going up from the core, upper body and like arm area. Obviously, runners, you're going to be using your arms some more than others. I get criticised quite a lot for the lack of arm movement I use, whether I'm sprinting or whatever. I tend to keep them quite low, and I don't use them basically at all. So yeah, I know, well, at least I get told how important they are, but I don't really know why arms are so like. I know, like, obviously it'll help you balance in the forward motion, but is it that crucial to your running performance? Going from arms at the side, like me, just not really using them, changing it to like proper arm movement. Would you say it's such a big improvement in performance if you can master that?
It's definitely important for run economy, and that becomes more valuable the shorter distance you're running. Because obviously, the shorter distance you're running, the more speed you're generating. Therefore, that arm drive becomes more important to help cycle the legs. So if you think when we run, we move the opposite arm to the opposite leg, called contralateral movement. So if you want that leg to be moving as efficiently as possible, getting that good turnover, then ideally you want a similar movement from the arms, help the brain coordinate the two in sync. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So therefore, again, we're talking about run economy. We're trying to be as efficient as possible every stride to demand less energy from the body. And that arm drive syncing with that leg drive is definitely quite an important thing. So if you're cutting that arm drive short, you could potentially be cutting either the extension where the leg goes behind you or the knee recovery in front short as well. So therefore, again, your stride isn't as efficient as possible. Like I said, that becomes more valuable the shorter distance that we run. Because obviously, when we start getting to marathons and stuff like that, you're not going to expect to see people doing this kind of thing up and down. You know, because again, it will require a little bit more energy for them to do that. Plus, their stride rate isn't going to be relevant to it. But especially for something like a 5K, that arm drive could be quite an important piece again to help run economy.
I guess I think in my head that using your arms more, obviously, as you say, you are using more energy. So in my head, it's like I won't actually be as quick because this when I try it, like because obviously I think sometimes I'm going to try it feels quite a lot harder than just what I do naturally.
It will, because you're engaging more muscle to do that. But there's no reason why you can't condition and strengthen the muscles that are involved in that to help it feel more comfortable over time. But you know, again, like I said, every run coach out there will know the basics of tall posture, arm drive, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you covered it as well on your leadership in running fitness course, you know, because again, I've done that course as well. And, you know, they talk about the arm drive, and it may be just, again, that you need some drills, you know, so again, some repetition of just doing the arm drive whilst engaging in some basic drills like A skips, B skips, all that sort of stuff. That might help fix the problem. But obviously it's got to be a conscious practice for then it to become an unconscious skill. But like we talked about with the cadence, that could take quite a bit of time. So it's you know, that could be a 1% for you. You know, it could be that small of a gain, but that could be 10-20 seconds potentially on your 5K.
Yeah, which I definitely wouldn't say no to.
That's exactly, over 5K, that's huge gains, isn't it? Especially at your level at the moment where you're trying to claw seconds back to get to that certain PB. So obviously it could be a technique and skill thing, which is where, like I said, you do running drills and all that sort of stuff, which again tend to not be in sort of favor of a lot of runners in terms of just basic movement drills. But then obviously we can look at the strength to help it feel more comfortable, especially the strength of the upper back muscles. So doing things like one arm rows, barbell rows, pull-ups, TRX rows. There's a whole host of different bits of kit you can use. And again, we can use water bottles and rucksacks to do those rows. So that all helps strengthen their upper back muscles, the arm muscles, and also things around the traps and the rhomboids. So again, all those key muscles for helping get some strong and efficient run strides with the arms, but also it's good for posture. So again, the more pulling exercises we do, the more it helps pull the shoulders back, lift the chest up, open up the chest here, open up the shoulders at the back to keep you more upright, which again, as we know, is a basic part of efficient running technique.
Definitely, yeah. So obviously arms are basically crucial. As you said, the shorter the distance. Obviously, I guess we're not really speaking about sprinting distance, but you see like the 100-meter, 200-meter on TV, you see the arm movement. It's, you know, it's pretty like their technique's pretty perfect a lot of the time.
Well, this is it. You try and run as fast as possible without moving your arms.
I got told that today actually by Sean, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see the difference. So you try and sprint as fast as you can without moving your arms, see how it works out, and then try it again with as big an arm drive as you can. I guarantee the second one will be faster and be more efficient. Yeah, because again, it's almost like a natural reflex of the body. To move the leg, you've got to move the opposite arm if you want to be efficient. So like I said, the more in sync they are, the more kind of rough sort of speed they are together, the easier it is then to carry on that speed going forward.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, so 5K is still relatively short distance, to be fair.
I would say.
So, you know, I guess as you say, but then again, a lot of people say for like half marathons and marathons, it's all about like efficiency. I guess arms come into that as well.
They do, but they're not obviously going to be as exaggerated. Like I said, think about the cadence as well, associating cadence with the degree of arm drive. Right, obviously, the faster you go, the more likely your cadence is going to be, or you know, your stride rate is going to be bigger. Does that make sense? Smaller. Yeah. You're going to take in bigger strides as you go faster. So therefore, to match that speed, like I said, that's where the arm drive will become more and more exaggerated to the point where you're sprinting. You see how bigger strides they take when they sprint. that obviously sinks in with that fast arm drive. Obviously, when you're doing marathons and stuff like that, your stride lengths are going to be smaller, so therefore you don't need as exaggerated arm drive. You still need it, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be like all the way up here like a sprint, stuff like that. Absolutely, arm drive is crucial for any distance, but the degree of arm drive will obviously vary. So for you might have a good arm drive currently, which will be good for longer distance, but to get that little bit more efficiency out of you for your 5Ks, you just need that little bit more emphasis on it.
And you say strengthen the area around the kind of arms to help with that. Yeah. Are you speaking like shoulders when you're saying that, or like?
So if you think the movement here of moving the arm up and down should be coming from the shoulder, not from the elbow. Yeah. So yes, you might want to look at the arms. I would say primarily look at the shoulder itself. So things like, front raises, lateral raises. And as I said, a big part of it is rows, because that still helps strengthen around the shoulder complex, including the upper back and the lats and all that stuff as well, which are key movements key muscles in terms of helping that arm drive as well. And as I said, if anything, just have better posture, which might help the arm drive feel more comfortable. That might be why it feels awkward for you, because you might have restricted range around here because you're not doing anything for the back. Right. And that's the same with a lot of people that train, even if it isn't a runner who go into the gym, they all train the muscles on the front of the body. So therefore that hunchback starts to come in. To open that up, you just want to do more pulling exercises like rows, and that will help with that posture. And maybe that even might just help your arm drive feel more comfortable as you exaggerate it more.
Sorry, when you say rows, what actually is it like?
So pulling yourself towards something or towards you. So, one arm rows is, where you see people on a bench and they're pulling a dumbbell like they're doing some soaring.
Right, yeah.
One arm dumbbell row, or like I said, using a TRX and lying back with your arm straight and pulling the TRX to your chest and then lowering yourself back down, or a pull-up. So that's a vertical rowing motion. Okay. Basically, anything that involves you pulling yourself or pulling something towards you is classed as sort of like a row.
Right, okay, interesting, yeah. Actually, there was one period where I did like a lot of pull-ups for like 8 weeks, and I don't know if it's like a coincidence or whatever, but I did a race like the Cumbrian Run after that, and that was like my best like performance really. I don't know, it could be a coincidence, but it's
absolutely. But again, it could be that again you just had more strong posture that led to a little bit more of an efficient arm drive. It potentially minimized the instance of fatigue kicking in on posture, because again that's another thing to consider, especially on the longer races. As you fatigue through the upper body, you'll naturally start leaning forward more at the hip. So therefore, again, that mutes your cadence and your run stride and potentially hinders performance or efficiency. So again, just by having some better strength in the upper body could improve the muscular endurance of the upper body as well, and minimize you kind of hunching over as you start to get tired. Even if it just prolongs it by another mile, that could be another mile where you're running a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more faster before fatigue kicks in.
Definitely. And it all adds up, as you say. So yeah, I guess we've covered pretty much most of the body. Is there anything you can do on your head? Any haircuts?
I mean, it depends. If you look at Formula One drivers and stuff, they start doing all these neck weights and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. We don't need to go that extreme, but I hope that even just from there, people can understand that what we talked about there, we could talk literally about maybe 4 or 5 exercises that you would want in your routine. So not a huge amount, and obviously you can vary those and change them out as you've kind of made those redundant. But the key is you want to focus on some sort of car strength, some form of sort of upper leg strength, a bit of core stability, and then, like I said, some form of rowing for your posture and upper body. So I've kind of 4 key areas there, and maybe 1 or 2 exercises for the upper leg, just to add a little bit extra in terms of the glutes and the hamstrings as well. So you're talking 5 exercises for a strength routine. You do 2 or 3 sets of those, you can be done in half an hour on all of those exercises.
Brilliant, yeah. I feel like I've had a one-on-one coaching session today. It's been brilliant, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, just to kind of sum up like how important strength conditioning is. As I said, some people do it more than others. I've been bad with it myself. But it really is crucial to both performance, keep you running as well. Like, I know a lot of people they just want to go out and run, as we said. But to have that ability to go out and run for as long as possible, you need to kind of add the strength conditioning. And as you said,
you need to earn that right to go out for longer and longer and faster and faster.
Yeah. And as he said, like, it doesn't have to take long. You can do a lot, like calf raises aren't hard to do. You just go on the stairs or whatever, or you can do them on flat, I guess, but it's good to do them on stairs.
Yeah. I've got loads of videos on my YouTube channel of exercises. You can easily go on there. They're all free. And you can easily find calf raises on there, lunges, all that stuff, and watch the videos. So there's the technique for them. They're not that hard, like you said, so it's easy, really. It's just having the will and the sort of the discipline to do it, but understand the whys, and hopefully we've explained that in a bit more detail to some people to give them a bit more motivation to do it. It's hard to. I can totally understand people who don't know the benefits or the reasons why they do that strength work. So then they're not going to be investing in it because they don't think, well, what's the point? What's it for? You need to understand why, and hopefully we've given a little bit of an insight into that.
100%. And if anyone wants to take it any further and they want to get some more specific advice, where can they find you, Lee? Where would be the best place to kind of...
So I'd probably say, like I said, have a look on my YouTube channel first. There's loads of videos on there, or just get in touch through my social media, The Intrepid Athlete, or on my website. And like I said, if you want to take it that extra bit further, I can give programs and all that sort of stuff, like I've done with a lot of runners, whether it's online or face-to-face. If you live in the lakes, get yourself down to the strength runners classes on Tuesdays and Saturdays. That'll be the easiest way. Any ability is welcome. I've got runners of all different experience, whether that's pro to recreational. So yeah, those are probably the best ways.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Anyway, it's been really interesting. I'm glad we didn't do the other topic as well, because we've been here for another half an hour, I'd say.
That's a good shout, that. So, but like I said, that's the problem when you ask me to talk about strength training.
It's good though, because you're obviously an expert. You know what you're doing with this area, so it's brilliant. But yeah, thanks again. Thanks to anyone that's watched. If you're watching at this point, then fair play to you. That's impressive. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. We will catch you next time. Not too sure what we'll do with topics. I know we've got the tips for beginners, but we'll see. We'll have a little talk about that after anyway. But yeah, thanks for joining. Make sure to check out Lee on all the socials, and we will catch you next time.
Cheers.